All right. Well, today I'll be facilitating and moderating this webinar, which is called TCO Deep Dive, Understanding the Lifetime Cost of Alternative Vehicles. My name is Trey Pope, and I will be the host today of this webinar. And to let everybody know, we'll have two presentations today, and then after that, we'll have a Q&A segment at the end and closing comments. Next slide, please. So as you can see here for this webinar, we have two presenters, which will be Juliana VandenBorn, the Senior Air Quality Planner at NCTCOG or NCTCOG otherwise. And we'll also have Cabell Hodge, who is with the National Laboratory of the Rockies, and he's our Vehicle and Infrastructure Analysis Group Manager. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the what's called the Saving Money and Reducing Trucking Emissions Program. We call that SMART with an E on the end. And what this is, it's an initiative that connects the trucking industry with emissions reducing and cost-saving technology and strategies to help drivers, owner-operators, and fleet managers to reach their sustainability goals in a cost-effective manner. Within this, we work to build relationships, share information and resources, and also to promote the use of smart way verified technology. Next slide, please. All right, to begin, our first presenter for this session is Juliana VandenBorn, and she's a Senior Air Quality Planner on the Alternative Fuels and Energy team here at NCTCOG, and also for Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition. NCTCOG was designated by the U.S. Department of Energy as a host agency for DFW Clean Cities back in 1995. DFW Clean Cities participates in the National Clean Cities and Communities Partnership to advance clean transportation nationwide. So with that, everybody, please welcome Juliana as she shares information on TCO for heavy-duty trucks, as well as infrastructure and funding opportunities. Juliana.
Hi, thanks, Trey. Yeah, so I'm Juliana VandenBorn, Senior Air Quality here at NCTCOG. So next slide. All right, Trey already went through this. So our team kind of wears three hats. The Regional Planning Agency, which is the Council of Governments. Then we have the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is a policy body, the Regional Transportation Council, and then one of the ways that we really implement cleaner vehicle technologies in the DFW area is through the Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities Coalition, which was designated by the Department of Energy. And so also on this slide here, I just have a map of the NCTCOG region and some of the air quality issues that we face in our region, particularly non-attainment for ozone. So that also kind of drives a lot of the work we do here at the COG and the Air Quality and Alternative Fuels team, and then as a Clean Cities Coalition. So next slide. Sorry, I think one back. There we go. So this is just a visual of the National Network of Clean Cities Coalition. So they are all across the country, and here's some of the initiatives that the Department of Energy partnership works to advance. So if you are not in the DFW region, you can feel free to reach out to any of the other coalitions across the country. Next slide. So at NCTCOG, this is our team, the Alternative Fuels and Energy team, and here's some of our key focus areas. So we have a team designated to clean vehicle. Then we have a team particularly focused on alternative fuel infrastructure, and then an energy integration and community readiness side of the team. And then A lot of what we do includes funding support, which I'll get into more detail later, technical assistance, so we can provide kind of consulting type services. We do a lot of planning projects as well as deployment projects that I will get into a little bit later, and then raising general awareness about air quality issues, alternative fuel use, both to fleets and the public. Next slide. All right, so here's a quick snapshot of alternative fuel vehicle adoption growth in Texas. I just kind of wanted to give everybody a good overview on where Texas is right now in the alternative fuel space, particularly related to total cost of ownership, which we'll get into a little bit later, but it's a little difficult to see on the second graph because it's a bit drowned out by the light duty vehicles in the Texas registration data, but just wanted to note that there are several large agencies and private fleets in Texas and the DFW region that are significant users of natural gas that you can't really note here in the graph. And then we've also seen some growth in the heavy duty EV space in Texas, and particularly the infrastructure deployment build out side. So next slide. All right, so this slide is just meant to highlight some of the projects in place to address the zero emission vehicle infrastructure build out, as I just noted. So the H2LA project was a planning project to create a blueprint for medium and heavy duty hydrogen truck fueling infrastructure from Houston to LA along the I-10 interstate, and then as well on the Texas Triangle, which includes DFW to Houston and then over to San Antonio and back up. And you can actually see that in the map on the left, on the right side of the slide. So that particular program is called the Texas Hefty. That is a deployment project that NCTCOG was awarded $70 million through the CFI grant program to construct 5 medium heavy duty hydrogen refueling stations. And that was informed by the Interstate 45 Zero Emission Vehicle Plan, which is over on the left lower side of the slide. And that plan outlined recommendations for build out of new charging infrastructure for EVs and hydrogen. And then there's some additional projects happening in other parts of the state as well. Next slide. All right, so on to total cost of ownership. So basically, your total cost of ownership is looking at the total annual cost of a new vehicle purchase over a set span of years. And then you can use this to estimate cost difference between, let's say, an alternative fuel vehicle versus your conventional fuel types like diesel or gasoline. So we do recommend conducting a TCO comparison as a step when developing like a transition plan for alternative fuel vehicles, or if you're just curious about getting into that space. Typical transition steps may include like identifying which vehicles in your current fleet are a good fit for an alternative fuel vehicle. Maybe it's a vehicle that's really old and just kind of ready for replacement. Maybe it's a high mileage vehicle that if you did replace with an alternative fuel, you could see a lot of air quality or economic benefits. Next is finding an alternative fuel on the market that would fit the use case of the vehicle that you've identified in your current fleet. And then at this point, it would be recommended to run a TCO comparison and potentially an emissions analysis if that's of interest. So you can actually compare those costs and properly prepare for any extra money needed in your budget to front the costs of an alternative fuel vehicle. Kind of in tandem with that TCO step, we also recommend researching any funding opportunities as an incentive, because that would directly relate to your total cost of ownership. However, it should be noted that you can reach TCO parity without any funding. It's not completely necessary, but it does certainly help, particularly in certain fuel types, like maybe electric vehicles or hydrogen, where they're more new to the market and still seeing pretty high vehicle MSRPs. So listed here, I have several available tools and resources that can assist you in doing the above the steps that I just went through. I'm sure that some of these tools, the other presenter will go through in more detail because they are DOE tools, but I have kind of a list from different sources here. And also just want to note that particular vehicle OEMs might also have their own vendor-specific tools that can assist in these sort of analysis as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a quick example of what a TCO comparison can look like, and this is using the A-Fleet tool, which is developed by the Argonne National Lab. It should be noted that the vehicle specifications listed here for these particular makes and models are not accurate or specific to these particular OEMs listed. The A-Fleet tool uses aggregated data from across the country to come up with what's called A-Fleet defaults for vehicle operation data. So that's what you're seeing here. I didn't go out and actually pull vehicle specific data. This sort of A-Fleet default data can be useful for TCO comparisons if your fleet doesn't have readily available or good operating data at hand, especially for things that are maybe harder to track, like maintenance and repair costs. However, it really is recommended to use your actual data when doing these comparisons to get that accurate depiction of your true costs. So here I'm comparing long-haul freight trucks, so your typical combination unit Class 8 hauling truck, in diesel fuel, compressed natural gas, biodiesel, which is a 20% blend, and electric. You'll also notice that I have included incentives for the CNG and the electric vehicle. These are just estimations based on these particular program requirements and would likely change based on your particular vehicle specifications. But both of these incentives are offered by the state of Texas. So the next slide will show the results. So with these incentives, you can see that it's really brought the CNG and EV into the same playing field in terms of cost when compared to a conventional diesel truck. One note here, though, is that Texas has implemented increased license and registration fees on electric vehicles, which is not shown here. So just bear that in mind, that for the electric vehicle, that particular category of registration, it would increase by several $100s over the course of the lifetime of the vehicle, because there is a registration fee and then I think, yearly or bi-yearly fee on top of that as well. So next slide. All right, so getting into funding, which, as we just saw, can make a big difference in your TCO comparisons. This particular funding opportunity is $58 million to NCTCOG, and it's to replace existing ICE vehicles in the class 6 or 7 space with zero emission versions. So that includes battery electric and hydrogen. And these are for vocational vehicles. So all of the vehicle types listed here are vehicles eligible for this funding. And this is currently open now. So you can apply at our website at nctcog.org/ntxzev. And that will be closing February 13th. So if you have any vehicles in the class 6 or 7, GVRW space, then this call for projects is for you. And something also unique about this is that it is not requiring just the replacement of diesel vehicles, but also other internal combustion engines like natural gas or propane, or gasoline. So it's a really unique opportunity. Next slide. So as in the example I showed, the state of Texas through the Texas Emissions Reduction Plan, or TERP, has several funding programs as listed here that can help with your vehicle funding. So there are a couple programs that are open now, but the cycle for TERP has just started. So all of these funding programs we will see opening within the year and the next fiscal year. So definitely keep an eye out on those funding opportunities as they become available. Next slide. Additionally, the state of Texas also has the Texas Volkswagen Environmental Mitigation Program, or TexVIMP. This is specific to heavy-duty vehicles, and it's specific to all electric vehicles. So you can see some of the program requirements here. However, this is a really lucrative program for governmental entities. It can be up to 100% of the incremental cost covered by this incentive, and then non-government entities up to 75%. So this is open until the summer of 2026, I believe, and there's still $30 million available. So definitely check it out. Next slide. These are some additional funding opportunities. So NCTCOG does have another call for projects available right now through the North Texas Diesel Emissions Reduction Project, and that one is open through March 13th of this year, and also specific to heavy-duty vehicles. And then if you are looking for infrastructure funding, there is the federal tax credit is available through the summer for infrastructure. Next slide. A couple other considerations for vehicle funding when you are researching these. A lot of programs require particular things of the vehicles to make them eligible. So something like if a vehicle can be scrapped, that's a requirement for some funding programs that we do see. And that the reason for that is it's a pretty easy way to realize emission benefits if you're taking a vehicle off the road and replacing it with something that is going to emit less. The fuel type of the new vehicle, so as I was going through those, some programs are specific to you have to buy a new vehicle, but it has to be electric, or it has to be an alternative fuel. There are some programs that do allow diesel to diesel replacements, but it's less common. Infrastructure needed, so some of the fuel types like electric, hydrogen, or compressed natural gas, let's say, might require a particular fueling infrastructure to be installed. So that's a consideration to take into account. A lot of people ask, can I use multiple funding opportunities for the same vehicle? Typically, no, because again, going back to that realization of emissions benefits, if one grant wants to claim that benefit of a vehicle taken off the road, the other incentive wouldn't be able to claim it as well. So, and then timing for funding. So kind of really looking a little bit far out for planning and lining up your procurement schedule with when funding opportunities are going to be available is another consideration. Next slide. These are just some other strategies to reduce emissions and save money. So we've got idle reduction, driver training, route optimization, right sizing, downsizing and drop-in fuels, and you can see kind of the different benefits from each of these strategies. And if you have any questions on these particular strategies or want more resources on them, please reach out to us and I can provide particular case studies or other real-world examples on these topics. Next slide. This is just a get involved with Dallas-Fort Worth Clean Cities. We have regular events and webinars that we do. And then, of course, to stay really on top of what we're doing, we do have a weekly email list that you can subscribe to. And the next slide, I believe, is just our contact information. So that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Juliana. And we appreciate you sharing the much valuable information with us.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat in regards to it says in the A fleet example, was the Freightliner Cascadia the natural gas truck a 15-liter engine? Do you happen to know, Juliana?
So kind of as I was saying in that example, really I was just using the OEM make and models as examples of different types of fuel types and vehicle types on the market, but the actual data to the right is not actually specific to those particular manufacturers. So I can double check in the background tab of A Fleet whether that default data that I used for natural gas has a particular size of engine, but it's not specific to the Freightliner Cascada.
Okay. And I'm checking just real quickly. I didn't see any other questions posted at this time. Thanks.
Outstanding. Appreciate that, Juliana and Jason. So next, I'd like to go ahead and introduce our second speaker, Cabell Hodge, who is a Vehicle and Infrastructure Analysis Group Manager for the National Laboratory of the Rockies. In this role, Cabell leads a group of researchers and program managers who develop cutting-edge tools and analytical frameworks for alternative fuels. Those tools include novel approaches to assessing alternative fuel vehicle suitability and also setting charging stations. So with that, everybody, please welcome Cabell.
Thank you, Trey. And thanks, Juliana, for your presentation too. Yeah, it was super helpful. It has a bit of overlap with some of the things that I'm going to present. I guess if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to start with a bit of context on our laboratory and in particular a bit about what my group does. And I was going to talk about some of these publicly available tools and calculators, several of which Juliana touched on. I have a bit of a different viewpoint from them because my team developed some of these calculators. And then was going to talk about some more total cost of ownership research and resources. Next slide, please. One back. Thanks. So the National Laboratory of the Rockies was recently known as the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. We changed our name, or BOE changed our name about a month ago to capture the breadth of our mission a little bit better and to realign with our parent organization, which had been the Office of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, but is now the Office of Critical Minerals and Energy Innovation, CMEI. So at the lab, we do everything from foundational science to commercialization of different products. I work more on the accelerated technology scale up part of things, on the analysis and on the commercialization. not developing new battery chemistries in our group, more developing tools and validating novel technologies to see how they work. And a lot of that has to do with alternative fuel vehicles and integration with the grid. Next slide, please. So the way we define our group is that we provide tools, expert support, and analytical frameworks that are meant to help decision makers with the deployment of advanced vehicles and infrastructure. And I'm going to talk about some of those tools on the next couple slides here. Next slide, please. And actually, you can jump to it ahead. So this is the first place that I like to go. So, for example, to that question that was put forth in the chat by Rick, this would be the place where you could find the different vehicles that are available. And Rick probably knows this, not sure everybody does, but Cummins supplies really the only heavy duty CNG engine on the market, and they have phased out the 12-liter engine in favor of a 15-liter engine that has both more power and better fuel economy than the 12-liter engine. And so it has the potential to change some of the market. So any of the trucks that are going to be available for the next couple of years in the Class 8 space are going to be using that. And so you would be able to find that as well as whichever specific sorts of trucks you were looking for. And you can also filter within this tool by CNG, propane, battery electric, so pure electric vehicles or plug-in hybrid electric, biodiesel, all of the alternative fuel vehicle types. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see what sort of information you might get out of that. Now, on the light duty side, we pull in the information from fueleconomy.gov. So it's got a bit more on the specific vehicle, like any of the information you might find from fueleconomy.gov on the fuel economy of that vehicle, or on the engine type. The range for the electric vehicles would be pulled in there. You're not going to see the same thing exactly on the heavy duty side. There you're going to see more like the different options that are available. In this case, I was just filtering by the refuse options, and then picked a CNG and an electric one to show you what sort of information you might be able to find on here. The heavy duty vehicles are highly configurable, so you won't necessarily see this is just the one vehicle, right? Like the Tesla Model 3. I mean, I guess that even comes in a couple of different options. You'll see more like this Hale environmental rear loader or the side loader might be available in CNG, propane, electric, or diesel. Next slide, please. We've done quite a bit of work on the infrastructure side as well. So most of the upfront costs for new vehicles are out there. You can find them through the AFTC vehicle search or through a Google search. The question that we've gotten more is how much is the infrastructure going to cost us? And for the past 10 years, I've been going out to sites and helping them figure out the configuration of EVSE that's necessary to meet their needs, right? Whether that's level 1, level 2, or DC chargers of different power sizes, and helping them figure out what that electrical connection is going to entail. We decided to build that into a tool that anybody could use. So it's actually working through an issue right now around our name change. So it's currently available at evi-locate.nrel.gov. It's changing, and there's actually like kind of a bug in there right now, but that's going to change to .nlr.gov, hopefully in the next week or two. But the way the tool works is users walk through a series of prompts, and so each page has a bunch of prompts. including like how many EVSE of what type do you plan to install? And then do you plan to tap into an existing service panel, which is really typically only feasible if you're installing another charger or two, as opposed to the 10 ports that we have in this particular example. And then are you planning to tap into an existing transformer, or do you need to install a new transformer as part of that? Then you'll see on the next slide, the tool ultimately generates, in addition to that site diagram, a detailed cost estimate. The cost estimate on the left, that donut chart, just breaks things into construction, the EV charging station costs, electrical, and project costs, or soft costs are often referred to. But on the right, which is also going to show up in the tool, you'll see what those costs are exactly, right? So in this case, this is a station where we're installing a couple of level 2 charging ports and a couple of DC charging ports. So we've got a step-down transformer, we've got a 480-volt secondary transformer, service panel and breakers, conduit and housing, conductors. Whole bunch of other costs that are listed in here. And this information comes from several sources. We were pulling the charging station costs from some bid prices that the federal government had received. They were the first users of this tool. We were pulling the project costs from a series of invoices and some work that we've done there. So looking at thousands of invoices for that. The electrical costs were primarily coming from RS means adjusted for those invoices. And then the construction costs were based on real costs that we were seeing in the industry. Next slide, please. So one of the tools that we're working on right now is actually that AFDC vehicle cost calculator. This has been up for a number of years. If you're looking for something pretty simple where you can just plug in your existing vehicle and you're fine working within the existing constraints of this calculator, you can compare like several different Ford F-150s. So for example, that red one up top is a Lightning. It's an all-electric one. The one in the middle is the 5-liter 4-wheel drive gasoline conventional version, and then the gray one on the bottom there is the hybrid version. Now it's a little bit hard to see in here unless you're looking on a big screen, but those prices actually vary quite a bit. So all of the prices that you see automatically populated in the tool are based on the lowest price that's offered by the manufacturer. If you've bought a pickup truck in recent years, you probably know that it is hard to find any pickup truck for $33,000 or less than $40,000. Most of them are upfitted or not sold with a complete base package, and sometimes you can't even find those ones. So you can put in your own price. And then the fuel economy is going to populate automatically. You also have these default assumptions for normal daily driving use that are based on the average driving of Americans, around 12,000 miles per year, with about this split between city and highway driving, but you can change it however you want. One thing that's locked into the current version of the tool that I don't love, but sort of makes sense, is this assumption that you are going to finance the vehicle at prevailing market rates over 5 years, which maybe is the most common, but leasing is also common. Buying with outright cash is also common, especially in fleet examples. So that's what it shows you in the bottom right, is this cumulative cost of ownership by years, assuming that you are paying off the car in the first 5 years and the rest of the time you're just paying for fuel and maintenance. And so you can see kind of the crossover points for those different vehicles if you're able to read the fine print there. Next slide, please. So Juliana already covered this, but this is A-Fleet, and they offer a web-based or Excel calculator tool for vehicle total cost of ownership. I should point out this isn't my team's tool. This is produced by Argonne, our sister lab, another one of the DOE labs with whom we collaborate closely. This is a great tool. Generally, it uses this sort of generic vehicle and average assumptions. So typically, like you can overwrite it in the Excel version. It's like fairly easy to do, and you can actually put a whole bunch of vehicles in there. In showing the web-based version, the A-Fleet example wouldn't necessarily be like a 15-liter Freightliner, Cascadia. It would be like your average Class 8 heavy-duty vehicle, where they've averaged that out and made some assumptions around the vehicle. But that's what you can see. And so you can plug in here these different sorts of vehicle types. And so I threw out an EV, a CNG, and a gasoline light commercial truck. Think like a step van or something like that. In this case, that drives 24,000 miles a year and that you own over 15 years. And this one gives you the total cost of ownership over the entire life of the vehicle, as opposed to the graph that we had in the vehicle cost calculator. Just a different way of looking at it. And you actually, again, if you have the Excel version, there are a few different visualizations that you can pop in. But the web one's really nice. Like if you're just following along and you want to play around with that, it's a cool little tool. If you go to the next, and I guess I should mention this, that I'm showing these vehicle cost calculators and kind of increasing levels of complexity, right? The vehicle cost calculator on the AFTC is like the simplest. You can just like 30 seconds done with it. A-Fleet, you can do what you need to do probably in 5 or 10 minutes, depending. But typically you might want to spend a little bit more time digging into that. Now, if you want to get like pretty far into the weeds, on the next slide, I've got another total cost of ownership tool called T3CO. So kind of like a name off C3PO or play off of C3PO. And this one's going to let you plug in information about your drive cycle. So you can take like telematics data on how your vehicle actually operates in this case, a whole bunch of information from like your exact route, and actually plug that into this tool. And then it will provide you some like component sizing, like recommendations here, optimize all of that, and then generate TCO results by technology and by year. It's generally been used more to set technical targets. So if you're looking at what the future of the market's going to look like in 2030 or 2040 or something like that, this would probably help you establish all of that. And also kind of lets you evaluate the benefits. However, you can use it to look at an individual fleet, or you can use one of these other tools. Now, the next one I'm going to show you. Sorry, I hope this isn't overkill showing all these tools. Maybe after these next 2 slides, I could just take a break and talk about why you might want to use one for one case and another for another. This is called ZPAC, and it's a detailed fleet analysis for EVs. The nice thing about this one is it's not just total cost of ownership. It's also looking at whether there's a replacement option available for your particular vehicle, what your range concerns are going to look like. Now, it's really designed towards electric vehicles, so it looks mostly at battery electric and plug-in a hybrid electric. So to see really if nightly charging is sufficient or if very frequent public charging is likely. Lets you look at your fuel reduction potential, which is obviously tied to fuel and cost benefits, ultimately generates a ranking of the quality of replacement vehicle type. And then you as the user decide whether you want to, what you want to do with that information, right? So it might have identified 4 of these as good quality BEV candidates. But you might say, well, the first 2, sure. The third one, though, actually would be a pretty good plug-in hybrid option. The fourth one will go with the BEV. And then even though the next one's mediocre, I'll say that's a BEV too. And then instead of saying an ICE vehicle, in some cases, you can pick to eliminate that. And that generates all these different graphs. There's a whole summary dashboard section to this tool. It's an Excel-based one. And you can see one example on the following slide is the fleet charging infrastructure plan. So Z-Pak takes all of your, like individually, your vehicles, groups them into a parking lot. And then if you look on the next slide, each one of these lines represents, each one of those bars represents a specific location. So like this top one is the central motor pool for the location that we were running this particular one for. And it tells you you're going to need around 50 chargers when all is said and done. But your light blue is existing level 2 chargers. So you've already got 5 existing level 2 chargers. The blue hashed is going to be new level 2. And so you're going to need about 30 new level 2 charging ports. Then the green, the light green is going to be level 1, and the tool connects plug-in hybrid electric vehicles with level 1 chargers. So it's going to say you already have 2 level 1 chargers. You're going to need another 10 level 1 chargers when all is said and done. And then you've got 2 DC charging ports, and you're going to need another 4 DC charging ports in order to service your entire fleet needs. So just to kind of take a break and run it back on these different tools. The first thing was that vehicle search tool. There, we're just saying you can find any of the alternative fuel vehicles that you're looking for. If you just Google AFDC vehicle search. If you want to figure out how much the charging infrastructure is going to cost and you want to plan that out, that one's EVI locate. If you want to look at your vehicle costs, not including the infrastructure, well, you can use that AFDC vehicle cost calculator. And that's going to be connected to that AFDC vehicle search tool. If you want to do this for a fleet of vehicles, looking only at costs or costs and emissions, then you can look at a fleet. That's going to provide that information. T3CO is like super deep dive. I mean, maybe give me a call if that's the one that you want to go with. And then if you want to look at your entire fleet operations, you're really focused on electric vehicles and not the other alternative fuel vehicle types, Z-Pak is a pretty good option. So that's about half of the presentation. I'm going to go into some additional resources on the next few slides. These are various analyses and reports, starting with something again from my colleagues at Argonne that kind of underpins a fleet. So Andy Burnham and co. produced this vehicle total cost of ownership report 2021 that I really like. It looks at per mile cost of ownership, including all these different things, right? Like you see taxes and fees, repairs, maintenance, insurance, fuel, financing, and vehicles. Interesting thing you'll notice on the right, there are a couple other colors added to that, labor and payload. And that's because you're looking at a tractor trailer, and now you also need to consider what the additional time cost is or what loss you might have associated with driving around in a battery electric vehicle in terms of stopping to charge or not having as much space or having like a little bit more weight on the vehicles. So it's pretty interesting. It goes through these different cost components that you see on the bottom, right? I already sort of mentioned the class sizes. Those are the examples of the light duty ones. It also has medium and heavy duty. So it's got, compact and mid-size sedans, small versus large SUVs, pickup trucks. Then the powertrains, include ICE, hybrid, plug-in hybrid, fuel cell, and battery electric. In a fleet, they also have CNG and propane as well. Another cool feature to this, so it was produced in 2021. So looking at 2020 as kind of the baseline costs. And then it contains projections what the market might look like in 2025, 2030, 2035, and 2050. So that'd be a cool one to dive into. Those get pretty detailed, but you can find some good info in the executive summary. The next slide shows some of the EVSE cost analysis, and again, the level of detail that's in EVI Locate. So this is pending publication, and it's done by a good friend and colleague of mine, Ranjit Desai, and some other colleagues and friends. This is looking at public level 2 EV charging stations. This team was able to gather over 3,000 invoices and characterize them all and bring in, the information like on the EV charging station. So that blue bar is the middle 2 quartiles. So from the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile, what are those kind of like average costs you can expect to pay for an EV charging station? Somewhere really between $2,750 and $4,500 is typical per port there. And then you can see the red, those are all electrical costs. Orange are all construction costs, and the gray are soft costs. And so you can really see what some of the big drivers are in cost variability, like transformer and service upgrades are a big factor, right? You might not need to replace the transformer, or the service panel might just require a couple of new breakers, right? And then you also see things like that are a little bit more tightly banded, right? Like bollards and signage. You don't expect to pay more for those things. So really cool analysis forthcoming there. Hope to see that out soon. We have similar sorts of analyses on CNG shown on the next slide. But this is a little bit dated, right? So couple colleagues here, Margaret Smith, who's actually moved to U.S. Department of Energy, and John Gonzalez, who's still here at NLR, developed these costs for small, medium, and large time fill and fast fill CNG stations. If you're unclear on the difference between those, a time fill CNG station is like a trickle charge, kind of equivalent to a level 1 charger for EVSE. Whereas a fast fill CNG station is more like a gasoline station experience, where you should be able to fill up your tank in just a few minutes. So the example content breaks out equipment like the compressor and what that range is, right? And it says, okay, in 2014, range for compressors between 4,000 and 550,000. That's actually not that helpful, right? It's just like, could be very little or it could be a ton. So they broke it out by like, okay, if you want like 1 to 4 gasoline gallon equivalents in an hour, it's going to be pretty cheap. But if you want more like 300 gasoline gallon equivalents in an hour, well, that's where you're looking at it costing maybe $500,000, because you're fueling up, several heavy duty vehicles every single hour. And it breaks out the dispenser. And so John and some of our other colleagues are working on updating that, which is really cool. You can see on the next slide, there's a propane station cost report that was published at the same time. These are costs for small, medium, and large propane stations. Again, sort of broken down by the type of station and how much it will cost. We're also working on an update to this. So this is actually the most recent information that you'll probably find Googling around, are these 2014 reports on CNG and propane, but you can expect updated information coming soon. again, feel free to reach out to me if you're looking into that. Okay, so one more technical slide here, and that is on this tool, which is really like a dashboard called Fleet Ready. So Fleet Ready has real world data on over 1,800 vehicles in operation for over 1 million hours and 7 million miles. They're all organized by vocation. In this case, I filtered the map and all the data here to look only at vehicle class 8 and the vehicle vocation of local freight travel. And so here we've got, 757,000 miles traveled. Don't have the entire United States necessarily covered there. And then if you click on this or check this out, you can find like all sorts of things, right? Beyond just average miles per gallon that are going to help you understand what these vehicles look like when they are in operation using different fuel types. It's connected to this database called Fleet DNA and those analytics, as well as a powertrain simulator. So you can take this information and simulate what it would look like with a different fuel type using something called FastSim. All right, next and final slide. We provide technical support for different things. We're always interested in, what tools will be most helpful for like councils of government, clean cities, fleets. And so any thoughts that you guys have on things that could be helpful, or if you just have questions about any of these tools, we've got like a little bit of money to provide support. Maybe not, the same sort of detailed support that you could get through the team with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, but like quick questions and things like that. So feel free to hit me up and appreciate the time here today. Happy to answer any questions. That's it for me.
Thank you so much, man. That was really nice to see a lot of those tools explained out. I was looking in the chat. I didn't see anything posted. It looked like I could see where obviously you replied some information about the A fleet slide, some clarification there, and Juliana followed up. But I didn't see anything else right now.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I hope they're helpful. I mean, I guess if there were anything like that I want to get out of it would just be like, if you guys have input as you're looking into these things, it's a big part of what we do is just trying to produce things that are going to be useful. And so I think a lot of the folks in the audience probably are working through these questions themselves. So yeah, any feedback at all is welcome. But either way, I don't know, just happy to get out there and chat about stuff.
I did see a comment from Rick with NACFE. It said great information. So compliments to Cabell on your presentation as well as to Juliana. All right. So with that, I'd like to also mention that Cabell has his contact information up on this slide. And before we adjourn, I'd like to share details in our next webinar session, which is titled Right Sizing for Procurement and Deployment Needs. This will take place on Wednesday, March 18th, 2026 at 1 p.m. Central Time. During the session, we'll have presentations from Mike Roth with the North American Council on Freight Efficiency, also known as NACFE, as well as Ryan Bankard with UPS. And further down this slide, you'll see the registration link. And since everyone attending this live session will receive a copy of the presentation, you'll be able to click on the Microsoft Forms link to register for the next session. Next slide, please. And so with that, I'd like to once again say thank you to our presenters and also to those who attended today's session. This is our contact information for both Jason and myself. And so please feel free to reach out if you have any questions. This is the second of a series of webinars that SMART is hosting, and we hope to see you at our next webinar about right sizing for procurement and employment needs on March 18th, 2026.